Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. Mom and I are so grateful that you can join us for another week. And today we're excited. We have James F. Twyman with us. He's the author of I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You. And he has also written 24 other books, including the New York bestseller, The Moses Code. He's been invited by the world leaders and peace organizations to perform the peace concert in countries including Iraq, Croatia, Bosnia, South Africa, and most recently Ukraine, often while wars or conflicts raged around him. During many of these trips, he drew millions of people together to pray for peace during worldwide peace meditations. He's produced and directed 7 feature films and 12 music CDs, including the I Am Wishes Fulfilled meditation with Dr. Wayne Dyer, which was a Billboard charts #1 bestseller. He also was the founder of the Interfaith Seminary, which has ordained over 600 ministers from around the world. He currently lives in Mexico. I'm just not even going to try to pronounce that. And is the founder of the Namaste Village, an interfaith spiritual community with more than 50 residents. So, welcome, James. We're really excited
So
to have
good to
you
be
on the
here.
podcast.
Yeah. So I'll say it's Ajijic. If you look at it, Ajijic, it looks like Ajijik, but it's actually pronounced Ajijic. This is the biggest concentrated area of expats, American and Canadian, in the whole world
Oh,
along
wow.
Lake Chapala. So it's quite the area. And as you said, I'm here at Lake Chapala. I'm here at Namaste Village, rather, our spiritual community. And the other thing I'll add as we begin is the book. If you say it too fast, it's not, I don't know, maybe I love you. It changes the meaning completely. It's maybe, comma, I love you. So we'll talk all about that.
Perfect. Well, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started on your path and what inspired you to be an author and write these wonderful books and
Oh,
movies,
goodness. That's
songs?
such a big question. But kind of zeroing in on this book, I'll start. You mentioned these prayer vigils that I've had the blessing of being part of around the world, many countries at war or in conflict, asking people to simply stop and meditate or pray and send their prayers of peace to a particular place, whether it be in Iraq, where I was in 1985 at the invitation of Saddam Hussein and many, many other countries. And in some cases, millions of people getting really turned on by the idea that when we pray and when we come together as one prayer, it has a powerful impact on the world. And I would say, from my experience, maybe the most powerful impact in the world. So here I've been traveling around to war zones and conflict areas. And here now I've got the book, as we've mentioned, I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You, which is about a different kind of conflict zone. And that's the one that most of us are living in this polarized world where we are suffering from a grand pandemic, what I like to call the pandemic of being right. And this is what is tearing us apart. So we'll talk more about that as we get going here.
Yeah, I'll be excited to talk about that because I truly believe that is kind of how our world has become. And I love that you do these prayer things that are, you gather so many people together because I do find there is such powerful uh it's so powerful
Energy.
to pray to, yes, thank you. To pray together or to meditate together and do healings together like that for the world and for each other. And so I think that's a wonderful thing that you do with that.
Yes, well, as we know, that the time in which we live in this country and really the whole world is challenging, and people are being torn apart, relationships, families, all because they have a different opinion about a particular person or party or their political affiliation, whatever it may be. And yet we're really forgetting some of the basic lessons that we learned in kindergarten, like kindness and listening and not needing to force people out of our lives just because we don't agree with them. So, if you'd like, I'll tell you the story of how the book came about.
Yes,
Uh,
Yes.
it just came out, so I'm very happy about it. What I'm hoping will happen is that we're starting a movement of what I call depolarization, to have people all over the world who are committed to learning the tools to bring us back together, to really listen to one another. So it started with me around the beginning of COVID in a conversation I was having with my younger brother, who loves to argue with me. And I don't remember what we were talking about, but he was, I think, winning the argument. So I said three things to him that changed the course of that conversation and our relationship. I said, Kenny, I don't know. Maybe I love you. He said later, I hate when you do that. How can I keep the argument going when you say things like, and he's right. You can't, because if you don't have the other party clashing up against you saying, I'm right and you're wrong, and we listen to each other and consider the possibility that I don't know, just like you, we have our opinion. And I have things that I believe, but none of us know for sure what needs to happen. And so maybe if I listen to you, especially if you have a different perspective, maybe I'll learn something or hear something that I haven't heard before, and it will influence me. But all I really know is that if we don't have love and respect at the very core of our interactions, we're never going to go anywhere. So it began with my brother. I started giving talks about this all over the world. Excuse me. And every time I did, I could hear people saying those words, sometimes in humorous ways. It could be days later. Maybe they're in a discussion with someone else and they'll say, oh, I don't know, maybe I love you. And I realized this is sticky. This is catching on. So I hadn't really intended to write the book. I had decided that I wasn't going to write any more books. But then I was on a concert tour in last September. I was on the East Coast doing a one-man musical that I perform on the life of St. Francis of Assisi. And I was in New Hampshire, in North Conway, New Hampshire. I went out to dinner with my friend Walt and his wife. And what I didn't realize until then was that his wife owned a small publishing company, a very good publishing company. So I told them this story about my brother and the idea. And she said, if you write that book, I will publish it. So I figured this is the universe telling me I should write. So I started that night and I just started writing in my van where I was traveling. And the book actually covers from that night as I begin traveling down the East Coast and then all the way back to Portland, Oregon, excuse me, right before the 2025 or 24 election. Everything was haywire, as we remember. Signs are everywhere, arguments, people are on both sides. And I just had conversations with people who may agree with me and people who don't agree with me. And it gave me the chance to listen to their perspective. One example would be probably my very best friend in the world. Her name is Vicky, and anyone who knows Vicky would say that she is the holiest, most loving person in the whole world. So maybe you wouldn't be, but I was shocked to hear that she was a very strong Donald Trump supporter. Because I had this idea in my mind, and I realized that this was my own polarization. I had this idea that anyone who's loving and spiritual would never go that direction. And here's perhaps the most loving person that I know. So I listened to her and I let her express her thoughts and her opinions. And I learned so much and from so many other people. So it taught me these basic lessons, like I said, lessons that we learned in kindergarten, how to listen to each other without interrupting, without already forming my response while they're still talking, to consider the possibility that they may have something to share with me that will help me understand deeper. But more than anything, just to live the I don't know, and maybe, but I do know that I love you.
I love that. That is that is amazing, and I think everybody should live by that. Because really, honestly, I think it's true. Like we don't. we don't have to agree to get along. We can have our different opinions about whatever, religion, politics, money, raising children. It doesn't really matter what we have our opinions about. But I know, like, even like when during COVID, I know that I ran into that, like, just different people's opinions. And that is exactly kind of what I did was I took that step back and I'm like, okay, well, why do you think that? And what's your,
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean in the end I'm going to agree with you, but it does give me something to ponder that maybe I haven't thought of before, like you were sort of mentioning there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean that we're going to end up all on the same page. We may end up on different pages, but we can still respect one another. That's what's
Yeah.
been missing, respect and kindness. I don't know what happened to it, but I do believe, as you said, that a lot of it started during the COVID time. And what was happening, and I think this is one of the things I write about in the book, is how social media really impacts these issues. In social media, you have algorithms that identify what you already believe and then give you more of that. So if, for example, you think that the COVID vaccination is a secret agenda from some political cabal, whatever, they're going to give you other videos, other authors, other authorities that say that. They're not going to say the opposite. The algorithms are trained to teach you what you already believe. And so when I hear that over and over, it makes me think, well, I must be right because all these people I'm listening to agree with me. And then we concretize around that rightness. And that's why I call that the real pandemic. Because when I claim that I am right about something, if you agree with me, you're fine. But if you don't, that's a reason for me to push you out of my life. And that is just ridiculous. And it has to stop. If we are going to move forward, we have to be willing to have these sometimes difficult conversations with each other, but to still hold to the respect and to the love, even that we can share with people in our families, friends, whoever it may be, and not throw them out of our hearts just because they disagree with us on a particular idea.
Yeah, so true. So many people are so strong when they have an opinion, and if you dare not agree with them, it turns out to be this not very nice experience. So oftentimes you just find yourself standing back and saying nothing. That way you're not going to get involved in anything that's going to be, I guess, confrontational. But yeah, you're right. It's so much of it in the world today, even with the little ones. It's
Yeah.
amazing to watch it, and they're learning it from the adults, right? And probably in school and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's very strong, Renee, what you're talking about.
Well,
And
this
so we're
is why
talking about,
I believe that we need a whole movement. In my own life, I have had the opportunity to be at the beginning of several big movements like the ones we were talking about before, of people realizing the power when we come together, we hold a positive frequency and vibration on a given subject. That energy, that love, that grace can heal and create miracles. If you don't mind, I'll give you one example. I remember it was not the first time I went to Iraq, but the second. So the first time I had actually been invited by Saddam Hussein. My first book back in 1997 had just come out, and I was on a radio interview in the UK, and we were right on the verge of another war with Baghdad and with Iraq, and I just said something on this very popular radio show of how I would love just to sit down and sing the Muslim prayer for peace to Saddam Hussein. And maybe if we just held still and prayed together, who knows? Maybe a miracle would happen. Well, it turned out that the Iraqi ambassador to Great Britain was listening to that interview. Next thing I knew, I was on a flight to Baghdad. And uh, that was the first time we asked people to stop at a given time when I would be doing this concert at the National Theater there in Baghdad, to simply send their prayers and their healing thoughts to Iraq. There didn't seem to be any possibility of a peaceful solution at that time, but I could feel something shift. I remember feeling that it was as if it was raining prayers, raining this energy of love. And 3 days later, Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations at that time, arrived and a peace accord was signed. Did it have to do with what we had just experienced? I don't know. Maybe. I love you. But I can tell you that, oh, maybe a year later, things got dicey again. And so I went back. I had two friends, Greg Brayton and Doreen Virtue, who joined me. We promoted another prayer vigil. And at the time of the vigil, we did not realize that President Clinton had given the order for the fighter jets and the bombers to be launched from a ship in the Gulf to prepare for the final order to begin dropping their weapons. And something happened that no one can explain. They really still haven't explained it. What we know is that at the same time, there were millions of people who were focusing their energy on a peaceful solution. These planes, these bombers that were in the air prepared, and Clinton gave a stand down order. He called all of these bombers and fighter jets back to their ships. A short time later, launched them again, and then brought them back. Now, when these types of things begin to happen over and over, you start to think, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there is something in this energy. So I thought, why don't we apply that to a movement of depolarization? So what we ask is, obviously, the book is a good start. The subtitle is How to Depolarize Your Family, Business, Country, and the World. But we want people to go to the website and become part of this movement. The website is de-polarize, so de-polarize, de-polarize.com. And there's a little survey you can take, and that'll put you on the mailing list. And we're going to start sending out simple things that we can be doing so that we can become part of this movement. And maybe we can begin to see some of the miracles that we saw all of those years ago in bringing us back together as a country, as a people, and as a world.
That's, yeah, I love that. And I think, when you're open to something like this, and like even with you being open to being there and doing the Muslim prayer, is just an openness, is you're really like, I don't know what your prayer is about and how that will help heal, right? So I love this movement that you're doing because I think it's really, the world needs it so badly because we're so stuck in our own views, a lot of people anyways, and I think most people, it's hard to have that kind of concept to be open to that, but I absolutely love that. And I'm just thinking, even if into some different situations I've been in, I was like, can you imagine if I would have just said, well, I don't know, well, maybe, okay, I love you. Be like, what?
Yeah,
And
try it. It's
I,
amazing.
and I love the power of prayer because I think there is such an energy with that. And I'm so grateful that you told those stories for us and our listeners because it just shows what it can actually do when that energy is going out there.
I remember when I was on my way to Iraq on that first trip. The only other country in conflict or countries was during the Balkan War. I was in Bosnia and Croatia, and that was the subject of my first book, Emissary of Light. And but for me, let me see if I can point to him right here. That's St. Francis. Someone just gave that to me. I've always been a follower of St. Francis, St. Francis of Assisi, and I am a Franciscan now. And there's a wonderful story about St. Francis that I'd love to share, and it's always been my great inspiration. So during the Crusades, Francis had this strange idea, similar to what I had with Saddam Hussein. He thought that if he could travel to Egypt, to this fortress called Damietta, and this is where the great Sultan Al-Kamil, the Sultan of Egypt, the ruler of the entire Muslim world, was with his armed forces. If he could just go there and sit down with the Sultan and share with him the message of love that formed his life, he believed that the Sultan would end the Crusades on his own. Of course, everyone thought he was crazy, just like they thought I was crazy going to Baghdad and many other places. And yet he did. He went anyway. It took him 3 different tries to arrive, and finally, along with one of his brothers, Brother Illuminato, they arrived. They were taken hostage, captured. They didn't know what to do with these two friars who just wanted to talk to the Sultan. So the Sultan was curious. He allowed them to come. And not only was the Sultan himself so moved by the simplicity of Francis, but Francis was moved by the Sultan himself. And there was in his company the best known Sufi master in the world at that time, whose name was Eldin El Farisi, the Fakir Eldin El Farisi. And so these three men met, and they just left the agenda to the side and just spoke about their own spiritual paths and how they all promote love and peace and understanding. And the war almost ended at that time. The Sultan sent Francis back with a peace agreement idea, but the Crusaders said, no, we are here to overwhelm and to destroy. But what happened next was such a good lesson. What happened was, as the Crusaders made their way toward the Nile, the Sultan saw an opportunity. So he opened the floodgates into this particular low region where the Crusaders were. The Nile River flowed into this and completely immobilized the entire Crusader army. They couldn't move, their carts couldn't leave, their horses couldn't get out, and they were stuck there. They began to die of starvation and disease. And the Sultan decided to do something that you would think that Christians are called to do. He sent his soldiers in to feed them. And that's exactly what happened. And after that, the momentum of the Crusaders wanting to destroy ended. They went back to Europe. So it just goes to show another example of how these simple things can bring about such profound results.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any tips for people that are listening of something that they could do today to start some of this depolarization?
Sure. The first thing, once again, these are very simple. Just listen. When you come up against someone and they have a different opinion than you, even if they're forceful in their opinion, we have this inclination to jump in, to convince, to change them, to tell them what is really happening. So the first advice is just hold still, take a breath, and listen to them. Once again, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but you have to begin with that first step. I don't know. I think I know, I have my opinion, but there may be something else that's going to happen here. So that brings us into the maybe. And if I listen to you and I give you some respect, instead of just discarding your opinion altogether, there's going to be a real dialogue that's going to start. Usually the heat will dissipate, the energy will soften, and you can approach each other in a much more constructive way. This might be with a family member, it might be with a friend. There may even be friends or family members that have pushed you away because of your different opinions, or maybe you've pushed them away. So this might be an opportunity to reach out to them again and say, let's just have a talk. I would like to hear what you have to say about this, kind of like I did with my friend Vicky. And she was compelling. She shared things with me that I hadn't thought of. Most of all, that we just don't know what needs to happen. And so I think it's obvious that I am not a Trump supporter. I'll just say that. However, I have found that he is my greatest teacher right now, because my willingness just to give him the space in my own mind, in my own heart, to since he is going to do what he's going to do, to hold still within that and to watch. And I would love if a couple or a few years from now to say, I was wrong. He did a great job. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but at least I'm holding to the possibility, and this brings us closer together. What I have found is that it used to be that you had people way in the far left and people way in the far right. There were like maybe 5% or so on each side of the real radicals, right?
Right.
And what has happened in this pandemic of being right those spaces have increased. So instead of 5% on each side, now it's 10%, maybe 15%. So that makes up 30%, if it's 15 on each side, of people who are radical, and they're polarized, and they are so convinced in their own right opinion. But that leaves 60% in the middle. People probably like us, who are open, who have our opinions, but if we can be the ones, that 60%, to say, let's become demobilizers, let's be demobilizing agents and practice some of these tools, then maybe we'll get to some of these people at the far extremes, and we can start to decrease that number again, so that the radical elements on both sides are not as strong as they have been.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing. And I love that you say that, like just right, this is not what I am, but I'm going to hold this space just to see, because that doesn't mean you don't still have your opinion. It just means, you know what, I'm going to open myself up just to see, to what if things change, right? I mean, who
Yeah.
knows? And I think that's great that you are doing this and starting this movement. I really do, because I think it's an important one, because I do find, like, I've just found exactly what you said. People are so very, this is my opinion, this is that. Like you say, social media, the news, these things, they feed that. And then these people can't see beyond that little walls
Yeah.
that they've stuck themselves in.
I would say it's critically important right now. If we
Yeah.
are forward, as opposed to moving back, as I think we have been, we have to just begin practicing some of those things we learned when we were very young. Kindness. What happened to just being kind to one another? You know, it feels like it's a lost art. And I also know that it has to start with me. This is not me pointing my finger at people who don't agree with me and saying, you have to do this. I have to do it. And maybe if there are enough of us saying that, if there are enough of us who are practicing this ourselves, those people who are, more on the combative side will soften. Once again, it was like with my brother, when I wasn't batting heads with him and arguing, we couldn't keep the argument going anymore. Wouldn't that be great if we could start bringing families back together? If we could
Oh,
start
yeah.
bringing civility back to our families, our friends, online. So many ways that this has really gone the wrong direction, that we can bring it back by just practicing these very simple steps.
Mhm. Leading by
Yeah.
example, right? And I think
That's
that's
right.
an important message, because you're right. Like, it is so funny, I find, like, with talking to people, and like even just at my day job, right? Is like, so many people come in, and it's like blah 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 blah, blah, and there's no room for a discussion, and they can't, if you're talking, they're over talking you. And it's like, why can't
Yeah.
we just give that space to each other, just to have a nice conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. And it starts with us. We have to be instruments of peace.
Yeah.
You made prayer of St. Francis before. That's where it all starts. We have to be those instruments that begin that vibration, that begin the sound of reconciliation, that helps to depolarize all these people who have been pushed to the margins, and lost relationships and lost friendships. It's just been happening far too much today. But I don't think all is lost. I think that if we can really get this movement going, I think we can bring it back. So once again, I hope people will join the movement. Just go to de-polarize.com and start right there.
Perfect. Well,
Beautiful.
we'll definitely put that in our show notes. Do you think that people sometimes, like, to do this movement, do you think people's maybe initial reaction when they hear that is like, I'm going to just hold some space, and I'm going to open up and be open to this, conversation and dialogue? Do you think that people think I'm being a pushover, or yeah, like, that's kind of how I don't know why, but that kind of came to my mind when I was
It's a
thinking.
very, very good question. And there is a very fine balance here. Let's take many of the things that are happening today, families being torn apart. I think we can all agree that we want strong borders. This is not a bipartisan thing. The question is, how do we do that? And I personally believe that ripping families apart, all the things that are happening today, I don't think that it's a compassionate solution. And so when I see an injustice that's happening, when I see people who are being hurt, it's not about being passive. It's not about just saying, oh, I don't know, maybe I love you. I mean, that could be a start. But at some point, I have to say, I don't know what the solution is, but I do feel that this is not loving. One example would be, so I am an Episcopal priest and a Franciscan, and it is disheartening for me to see the movement of people in the world today who claim to be Christians, but do the exact opposite of what we are called to do, how we are called to behave and treat one another, and say, well, Jesus didn't really mean what he said. I'm pretty sure he did. I'm pretty sure that when he said, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, I'm pretty sure he meant it. And so for me as a Christian, in fact, I'll tell you something that I didn't think I'd share, but what the heck. Someone said this to me just a couple of days ago. She said, these days, I'm not calling myself a Christian because it's just too sticky today. What I'm calling myself is a follower of Christ, a follower of Jesus. To me, that makes sense because all I'm trying to do, and really what this depolarization is all about, from a Christian perspective, and of course, you don't have to be Christian to do this, but from that perspective, to follow what he said, just to take it literally, and don't just push it to the side because it doesn't meet my agenda. And we see that happening so much today in Christian circles, doing the exact opposite. And if I, for example, as a priest, I'm not going to preach politics from the pulpit, but I am going to preach following the gospel. Because if we do that, then all of these other things just happen on their own.
Mhm. That's well said. I like that because you do often see that. And I mean, that's one thing I've witnessed as I've been growing up is it's like, whatever your faith is, right? But it's like I'm Christian and I can do all these terrible, terrible things. And then on Sunday, I will go to church and all will be forgiven and we can start the slate new on Monday, right? And I have such a hard time with that because it's like, shouldn't you be living and following these beautiful, be kind to each other, like just really just human things, right? Wouldn't that be a lovely world if we could just be nice to each other?
Yeah, yeah, kindness. Once again, all the things we learned in kindergarten.
Yeah,
It is. It is.
it truly, truly is. So where can everybody find your book?
Well, they can go to Amazon or any of the other online. It may be in bookstores, but once again, if you go to de-polarized.com, there's a link where you can get it right there. And then I also encourage people to take the survey that's there. It's only about 1 minute and maybe two, and it helps us to more closely and clearly define what this movement is going to be all about. And then we'll start sending material, simple things that we can do every day to become depolarizing agents in the world.
I love that. And I think it's always nice when you can have these tips that you can follow along with, right? Because even though I think that a lot of this is really just common sense, I feel like our life is so sticky right now in our world of all of this that we need some of that common sense said in front of us. And, you read it black and white, and then you're like, oh, yeah, right. That, you know what? I do think that's how I should be.
Well, it's
Yeah.
been so wonderful to be able to share this with you. You're doing great, and just so happy I could have been on your show today.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much for joining us. We really appreciate you
We
coming
really
in.
appreciate, yes, we absolutely do. And if you had a final thought to leave with everybody, what would it be?
Uh, I'll leave with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, one that most people will recognize. He said, "Be the change you want to see in the world. Don't just talk about it, live it." Once again, as you said, don't go to church on Sunday and then have the rest of the week be hating on people. We have to start loving one another. We have to start respecting one another, whether we agree or not. That is less important than just being the change in our own lives. Then we become living, vibrating realities of this new world. And if enough of us are doing that, just as with those prayer vigils that we mentioned before, the changes will happen by themselves.
That's
True
wonderful.
enough.
And if
I
somebody, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mom.
I've adopted this saying recently. When I'm talking to somebody and they're very negative, I turn around and say, "What happened to you that was good today?" And they
Yeah.
stop in their shoes because they don't know how to respond. It takes them a few minutes to come back and think about it. And I've even had people say, "Well, nothing's happened good today." Nothing? Absolutely nothing is my
That's a
response
great
back
truth,
to them
Barb.
because
I'm
what's
going
that?
to put that in our depolarizing steps.
Oh, thank you. It works. Thank you very much for saying that. It's been
Yes.
wonderful having you.
Yes, it has been. You've been very insightful and just wonderful. We hope you come back sometime with us and share some
I would
more of
love
your
to.
knowledge. And if somebody wanted to do one of your prayer vigils, do you have those on your website as well?
Well, they're not on the website because they happen just when they
Okay.
happen.
Okay.
But if you go to the website that I mentioned and you do that survey, you'll automatically be on the website, and then you'll hear about anything like that would happen.
Okay,
Right.
perfect. Just thought in
Beautiful.
case people wanted to join in on that movement as well. So thank you so much for sharing space with us today. We really appreciate it. And everybody else, we will see you the next time.
You bet you
Thank
will.
you.